The Parable of the Man Who Slew Dragons, an ancient story written a few years ago, by Ryan Collins. There once was a village nestled in the foothills of a vast mountain range. In the village dwelled many people, and in the mountains dwelled many dragons. For the most part, the two realms had little to do with each other, but every so often, certain dragons would attack the village. These individuals would steal livestock, burn houses, and sometimes eat anyone who did not run fast enough. Unfortunately, there was nothing the villagers could do to stop these dragons, for there were no fighters among them, and the dragons who kept to themselves did not consider the villagers' problems to be their own. One day, a man seated atop a mighty steed rode into the village. On his waist hung a mighty axe, and on his back was strapped a menacing pike. The man proclaimed himself to be a dragon slayer, and he promised he would protect the people from the dragons. All he asked for in return was food, shelter, and acceptance as one of their own. This proclamation made, he rode his steed into the mountains as dusk fell over the land. With the dawn, the man returned. On his axe were the ruddy stains of fresh blood, on his pike was mounted the severed head of a dragon, and on his lips was a thrilling tale of the previous night's events. He spoke of how bravely he confronted and fought the beast, how harrowing his ordeal had been, and how close he had come to death before triumphing over his foe. The people were enthralled and praised him for his heroism. There were a few who were suspicious of his story, for he bore no signs of battle on his person, and some questioned if the dragon he had killed was one of those who had previously menaced the town. Yet everyone decided that it did not matter, for even the peaceful dragons were as guilty as the aggressive ones. So the man was accepted as the village's resident dragon slayer. They gave him food and shelter, and accepted him as one of their own. So it proceeded for a time. The dragon slayer would ride into the mountains at dusk and return at dawn with a dragon's severed head on his pike. He would never allow anyone to go with him into the mountains, and no one was brave enough to risk traveling there unaided, so there was no choice but to take him at his word. One day when the dragon slayer returned from the mountains, he had atop his pike the body of what seemed to be a common lizard. He claimed, however, that it was no mere lizard, but a juvenile dragon, and it was fortunate he had slain it before it grew into a creature that could do serious harm. Upon hearing this, and especially after several more days of being presented with such small reptiles, more villagers started to doubt the dragon slayer. Many could tell a common lizard when they saw one, and such creatures were harmless. They suspected that there were no more real dragons to slay, that they were either all slain or the survivors had fled, and the dragon slayer was killing the lizards simply to maintain his status. Even if they really were juvenile dragons, the slaughtering of them felt wrong even to those who hated the creatures. Yet there were still many who believed in the dragon slayer, and they continued to praise him for his bravery and virtue. So it proceeded for a time, until one morning when the dragon slayer returned from the mountains empty-handed. He had no blood upon his axe, and his pike bore no trophies. When asked why, he gathered everyone in the town square and made a shocking statement. The dragons, vile and crafty things that they were, had found a way to disguise themselves as people, and were lurking among them at that very moment. With sudden viciousness, he seized someone from the crowd and proclaimed her to be a dragon in disguise. There were signs about her which only he, as a true expert on dragons, could identify. He slew her as the crowd looked on, and as he held her head to the sky, he warned the people to be wary, for now the dragons were among them, and it was still his solemn duty to hunt them down. Now the dragon slayer stalked the village at night, taking individuals he claimed were dragons from their homes and killing them. So it proceeded for a time, but this period proved brief. One night, the dragon slayer awoke to find the village empty. The surviving villagers had packed up and fled during the day, for they no longer believed he was the hero he said he was, and no one wanted to be his next target. They saw through his ruse, and since they could not fight him themselves, they instead chose to leave him. So the dragon slayer was left alone. He had no enemies to overcome, no adoring followers to praise him, and no one left to blame. No one, that is, but himself. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.